in it? Like, how many institutions are there in India right now? And how many like therapists, or maybe you can say like trained professional?
So obviously, it's a growing space currently at the moment. We obviously are very underfunded, just in terms of mental health. If you look at how much the government of India spends on the mental health budget, they spend less than 1% of the GDP on mental health issues.
So Akanksha, thank you for joining us. It is a pleasure. So first, I want to start with this: is mental health is a very big issue, right? Very very big issue. So I don't know anything about this. So the first thing I want to ask you is, how do I recognize or understand that I have some problem that which is not maybe normal, or maybe I need help? How will I identify this?
Right. So I think it needs to start with the fact that you shouldn't look at it as a problem, right? So, for instance, no, that's completely fine because you're not wrong. You're not alone in that thought. What a lot of people don't tend to think about is the fact that you give so much importance to physical health, right? Like you see yourself gaining weight, and so therefore you want to make certain lifestyle changes in order to make sure that you have like the perfect physical health. um and mental health is very similar in that sense as well. It's a state of being, and people should regard it as that. Like everybody should look towards having like better mental health, and not as though it's problematic. Like it's okay even if you do have those problems, but there are certain lifestyle changes that you can do in order to have better mental health. So really it's very similar to like how you would pick up other activities, to rectify physical health. You would do the same thing with mental health as well. So it's not really taboo. It's not really something out of the ordinary. It's something that's very normal, and should be normal, but unfortunately
Yes,
people don't look at it that
definitely.
way. Yeah,
Yes,
which is
the
part of
stigma
the
is
problem.
very bad. The stigma is the problem. But I want to know specifically, like people who are facing this problem, they might
Right.
know that they actually have any problem, right? A person who is, you say, have anxiety, he might
Right.
just think that I'm overthinking things. It is
Hmm.
just normal. I mean, people always say, right? Hey, itna mat chinta kar. Don't
Huh.
overthink this. Don't overthink that. But then that normalizes things, right? He thinks, okay, I'm just overthinking things. I'll just
Yeah.
chill and that. So how do you recognize, because it is normalized so much?
Yeah. Exactly. So, one thing that a lot of mental health practitioners will tell you is that if it's systematic, right? You see yourself not getting anxious anywhere else except for, say, you go to an exam, right? It's natural to feel anxious when you're in an exam hall because there are certain things that are triggers, right? So let's say like a serious environment and everybody is more prepared than you are, so these are triggers that a lot of people consider as creating anxiety. And so in that situation, if you feel anxious, that's perfectly normal, and it's very possible that you're overreacting. But the difference is when you start feeling that way about every situation, like it's whether it's going to, a social event where there are, lots of people present. You don't have the same stressors as an exam hall, right? It's a different situation, and it's a different set of elements that constitute that environment. And so the fact that that feeling is consistent, if you're feeling consistently that way in a lot of different situations, that's when somebody would say, hey, okay, maybe you have a problem. You might want to see if there's a way that you can rectify it. And the key here is that it has to be consistent. If it's not, then it's not a problem. It's a normal reaction, and it's something that's quite natural. It's instinctual, which is what we, when we're trained in counseling, That's what they tell us. It's in our modules and stuff. They tell you that uh, this behavior has to be consistent for a certain period of time and in different situations, and only then you can diagnose that person as having a serious problem. But if that's not the case, then it's not a problem. It's a perfectly normal reaction.
And you explained it so well. So the thing is, again, let's say, so I identified this problem, right? I have some issues. So I want to know what are the degrees, like if, like for example, I'm just doing a comparison. If I'm having a common cold, I won't just rush to the doctor, right? I'll take rest, I'll take some meds, or maybe hot beverages like that. So if regarding this, surely there has to be a degree, right? So I can do with like meditation or yoga or something, or some severe which I definitely have to go to a doctor or a physician. So how do I decide?
Right. That's a good question. So, what a lot of people tend to think about is this, it's quantifying it in terms of physical health, but really it's quite different. So, um, when you feel like it's having an impact on the way that you function in your regular life, right? Like the fact that you get so anxious that you can't send an email. So, I'm just going to use the same anxiety example as earlier. um, that if you are so anxious to the point where you can't hit send on an email, that's when you start to realize that okay, this might be an overbearing problem and it's affecting my quality of life. That's usually the first thing that you should look for is this affecting the way that I function as a human being? Is it affecting the way that I deal with everyday circumstances, how I deal with my environment? That's when you probably would want to get help. But then again, it shouldn't be looked at as getting help only when you have those reactions. Perfectly normal people can also go to therapy, in ways where like there can be situations like right now, suddenly everyone's thrown into very problematic situations where they suddenly have a whole lifestyle change, and that can be stressful. So, uh, you should encourage people who don't have these reactions to also go to therapy. But one of the key points when you realize that you should possibly seek help is, like I mentioned earlier, it's when you realize that it's affecting the way that you function as a human being, your quality of life. That's usually when you would approach somebody to seek therapy.
Damn. I had no idea that even like we as perfectly normal, or you could say within quotes perfectly normal, also go to therapies. Like that is
Yeah.
something even popular culture don't like inform us that. I
Yeah,
mean,
because you think about it this way, right? Like people who aren't obese also go to the gym, right? Like everybody goes to the gym to like stay healthy. In a similar way, normal people also go, or like as you mentioned, like supposedly normal people who don't have, seemingly intense mental disorders can also go to therapy. Not that big of a deal, like it's completely fine. Yeah. I would say I would even encourage it. People should go, even if you feel like you don't have something that stressful. Yeah.
encouraging is a very strong point. We should, I mean, encouraging might lead to some people actually getting their lives better. Maybe they just needed that extra push, that yes, I have to get better. Because I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
the stigma around mental health. Ah, pagal. Oh, you'll get electric shock therapy and this that. God.
Yeah. I mean, we left all those things actually, technically we left all those things back in like the 80s when human trials were still relevant. But today you can't do those things. Um, Treatments for even like very serious psychiatric disorders don't use like electric chair therapies and stuff anymore. It's really just a combination of like different medicines and holistic other holistic methods. But those things are just because you see them in the movies all the time. and that's part of the problem. Like those things are ancient. Yeah,
It's like it has become like an urban legend. Like, uh,
exactly.
I mean, most of the times we also jokingly use that, like, Rachi bhej denge tere ko, this and that. I mean,
Exactly.
Rachi has it itself is a stigma. Like, Rachi bhej denge means you just go to that asylum, nothing else.
Right. Yeah. But that comes from the fact that a lot of institutions today, they aren't really supported with a lot of funding, and they're very poorly funded, which is why they're not able to maintain the same quality as, say, like a regular hospital, because there is a certain stigma around it, and that's pretty unfortunate, actually. Other than if you go to like private spaces where these are more acceptable concepts. Um, but yeah, otherwise, I can see where that stereotype comes from, and it's pretty unfortunate. And I think um, now is an incredibly important time when we all should be thinking about mental health more seriously, um, especially in context of like recent events and with the pandemic going on, people working from home and all of that. There's so many different elements that could stress people out on an everyday basis that we should be taking it more seriously.
But coming to another point, now you said
Mm.
that these institutions are so underfunded.
Yeah,
So I think, taking me for example, like I live in Asansol, right? This is a city in West Bengal.
right.
So the nearest mental institution, I mean proper
Mm.
mental institution, is in Kolkata, like 250 kilometers.
Yeah,
So and some things like therapy you have to go like regularly, like weekly.
yeah,
So that, I think, don't you think that becomes a hindrance, like middle class people, lower middle class people, even poor people? Like, I think India has so much of the population is poor, like really, like
yeah,
BPL, the people under BPL, so they cannot afford, right? And
yeah,
I also think that insurance, medical insurance, don't cover this type of issues. Like in no hospitals they cover these types of issues. So
yeah.
that also is creating a problem. But I want to know how much truth is in it. Like, how many institutions are there in India right now? And how many like therapists, or maybe you can say like trained professional? Do you think is it enough in India right now?
So obviously, it's a growing space currently at the moment. We obviously are very underfunded, just in terms of mental health. If you look at how much the government of India spends on the mental health budget, they spend less than 1% of the GDP on mental health issues, despite the fact that a large chunk of our population is depressed. In the WHO, they publish these reports that kind of document where the pockets of the world where the people who are severely affected are, and India is one of them. Like,India has a massive population of people who have different types of mental disorders. And the issue here is that if we're spending less than 1% of that GDP and it's getting concentrated in just like the metropolitan cities, it's not going to the people who need it the most. And in this country, that pocket of people are like the farming class. We always see in the news about farmer suicides, and it's those pockets of society that really, really need that funding, but it's not going to them. If you look at the average cost that a person who regularly goes to therapy pays, right, to access any therapeutic measures, you are minimum paying about 500 rupees an hour. And on top of that, if you do get consulted for medication, then you have to go to a psychiatrist, because psychologists cannot write you prescriptions. So you have to go to a psychiatrist who can, and they charge you an additional 2000, almost up to 2000 rupees an hour. So if you add it all up, you get up to 3000 rupees just for a day's worth, maybe. And that's not fair, especially to a significant chunk of people who can't afford it, which is, unfortunately, the lower castes and the people who belong to, like, marginalized groups in this country. and that's a problem. That's a massive problem. Especially if you're going to make it such an, the cutoff itself is so expensive. Like, how are people going to be able to afford that, right? Like, it's pretty crazy. Yeah.
And the government also don't have any institutions like government hospitals where you can't go and have treatment for free.
There are a couple of places that do offer like counseling sessions, and I know for a fact that a lot of colleges these days have, college counselors that do therapy sessions if you need them. But unfortunately, like, so for example, in Bangalore, we have this thing called NIMHANS. It is the government run institution, and they sometimes have, free therapy sessions. The women's cell of the police department has free therapy sessions. So sometimes those are acceptable options, but not a lot of people know about it, and not a lot of people know how to access them in the first place. So really, it's a very gray area right now at the moment, because we're struggling to find out like what is the best way to make sure that everybody can access mental health. But it's difficult, and I don't know what the right answer to it is.
I'm gonna ask you a very dumb question, but I know
Yeah.
most of the viewers will ask you this. Is this
Yeah.
why does why do you need two personal to do one job? Like, why can't a psychologist just give you prescribe you meds, or why can't a psychiatrist just listen to you or give you advices? Why do you have to just for meds I have to go here, for therapy I have to go there? Like, what is this divergence? I mean, they
Right.
are both supposed to work in the mental field, right?
Yeah. So okay, let me think about the best way to explain it to you. It's like having a coach, right? So let's say you want to improve like your basketball skill. You would want to have a coach that helps you with basketball, right? And not a coach who helps you with football, for example. So difference here, the key difference here is that there are different approaches as to how you can deal with your own, mental health, and how you want to go about it. Which is why the two distinctions are there. Now, the key difference here is a psychiatrist also has experience with neurology, whereas a psychologist might not have that experience. So if you are somebody that needs medical dependence, you're going to have to need to go to the psychiatrist, because the psychologist is not licensed to give you that medication, because they only know how to treat your external, like they only know how to guide you in terms of how you can go about your life in a more like a seamless way, versus a psychiatrist who medically knows how to intervene. While both of them can help you, they definitely can. The difference here is that if there is something, if there's an underlying neurological problem, which in some cases there are, because sometimes some people need, a boost in their dopamine receptors, which is what helps you feel better as a person. Um, and you need medical intervention. Only going through classical therapy is not going to help you, which is why you need that distinction, which is why you need those two approaches.
So, in a nutshell, you can say that meds is for short term and like therapy is for long term.
That's also not how I would put it, because sometimes people are on medications for not just the short term, but for many, many years actually. And then, the psychologist and the psychiatrist work together. So usually what happens is, the psychologist and the psychiatrist work together to determine when you can get off your meds, etc., and when it's a comfortable time for you to just go with the classical therapy method. That is in case you are prescribed medication. Um, so it works in tandem. So I wouldn't say that it's distinctly exactly that, but there are, which is why they both go together. So you need both of them to collaborate. Which is why, like, if you're going to one therapist, they will recommend their psychiatrist to you. That way, there is an understanding between the three of you, and then they know what's best for you, so you can access the right methods for you.
Hey guys, this is Pronit. Thank you for watching the video. There's another part of the podcast that's going to come out very soon. I request each and every one of you to share this video as much as possible because mental health awareness is something which cannot be neglected anymore. It needs to be shared and talked about openly and freely in this country. Apart from that, if you like the video, please don't forget to leave a like and tell us how you feel about the video in the comment section below. You can follow us on our social media handles. The links are given in the description below. Till then, see you in the next video. Peace.